more.
All right, we're gonna get started today. Good afternoon, everyone. We, just a little note that the sign-in sheet, we don't have the official sign-in sheet today. So there's a sheet of paper moving around the room. Please sign that. If you have a less than legible signature, maybe put a note next to it. Make sure that we have everyone's name.
I left it in my office. You guys can fire me if.
No, never.
I think she was trying.
Yeah. She's trying to.
Smart move. All right, do we have a motion on the minutes from April 8th?
Move to approve the minutes from April 8th.
Laura? Do we have a second? Second. All right. Any further discussion on the minutes from April 8th? All those in favor of approval, please indicate so by raising your hand. All right, any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. All right. I did not know that Linda was going to be here today. I missed that. Sue, I know, is on a phone call with a heck. She said she might end up showing up late, but she may miss the meeting entirely. So we'll go on to Mary Ann with the EDC report.
I would maybe help here. I think everything we talked about is on the agenda.
Pretty much. I think the key areas, there was an email, as you all probably saw, in reply to the agenda that went out. We did discuss in AC the formation of the provost task force in connection with the APSU MOU. So there's been some discussion about that and some follow-up emails. So that task force should be formed soon. And then work will begin on that. And Karen has reached out, I think directly to Melissa, to address any issues with the few faculty who might be immediately impacted in the short term.
So what do you say?
Because of elections. So how it will be handled for faculty who may want to run for election or step up when Mary Ann sends out the committee opening slots if there are faculty who are interested.
So you're talking about the professional faculty that don't have any degrees for theirs.
And so we've been asked, Melissa and I, to kind of summarize how many hours and what the tasks are, etc., to give to parents so that I guess she can decide what to give for what. So
Can you clarify that?
Can I repeat that? You're not actually very good. So the idea is to have the number of hours for the committee members for each of the Senate committees. And once I have compiled all of that, and we have most of that information because the people on the committee, Paul and Precious is not here, already contacted chairs, and so we're putting that all together. And I guess Melissa met with Karen, and she would like to meet again with Melissa and with me to discuss, I guess for her to kind of decide how many ELUs to give for what committees, Melissa, is that?
So you're talking about to the committees that
Right.
faculty that might be professional practice would like to serve on, and then to try to equate it to the ELUs
Exactly.
they would be given.
But I wasn't at the meeting, and Melissa was, so.
Yeah, so I could do a real brief, I don't want to take too much time, but, so they're basically, we need a short-term solution because there's people who are already on committees that their committee appointments would presumably continue for next year. And also people running for Senate or currently on Senate, their seats would continue next year. So there's kind of like a short-term solution of looking at who's currently on the committee that is in this category, who's currently on Senate that's in this category. And so then getting, a list would be presented to Sue, and then she would have to approve it, but Karen didn't seem to think there'd be any issue with that. And then going forward, we would need to have a process to get a lot of this stuff cleared up early enough so that anybody who's interested in doing one of these jobs for the year afterwards could then formally request the provost office to get service loading for that. And we'd have to do all that before chairs started figuring out, you know, who was teaching what, when, and all that stuff. So we basically have to do some of this work earlier in the year. We couldn't wait until the last minute. So it was kind of just talking about what do we need to do for next year, and then what would need to be done, you know, for a more permanent process.
And in the end, it's Sue who determines how many ELUs we give for the work on committees, and I, not knowing the process very well, was a little bit surprised that it would have to be approved at that level, and I was told that the provost is the only person who can give out ELUs, so it's logical for her to go over those.
And how is that gonna be determined?
That's what we're not exactly sure of it yet, but there will be further discussion on that.
One thing Sue did say is that her preferred process would at least be that if a professional track faculty member wanted to serve, for instance, on Senate or one of these committees, that they would first go to their chair and discuss it with their chair. And Sue said she believed the phrase she said was that she couldn't conceive of a particular reason why she would oppose ELU if a chair supported the request, but that she thought it should start with the chair. That was sort of her initial comment about how to handle it.
It's still a question of how that's going to be computed.
Yes.
So a person could go to the chair and say, I would like to continue on the Senate because this is what I do, and blah, 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 and then, but there's no, at that point, they don't even know what their ELU loading is. Is that correct? I don't want to be
For the
labored, I'm
service
just
or
confused.
the service loading, or for their regular courses?
Well, they're linked.
Well, they're linked, right? Because if they get loading for, is it loading for service or they get paid out?
They could either put ELUs in the bank, or they could get paid out. That's what it was. But basically, everyone would know, like, if you're on this committee, you get 2 ELUs, if you're on this committee, you get 1 ELU, you know, that kind of thing. It would be the same for everybody.
I'm having trouble with the details, and you can't help me because you don't know that either, and you tried.
Right, and I think that's what the task force would be partially working out.
Determining the ELU.
Well, yeah, and the, I don't know about that part.
Technically, the
but-
task force, if I understand the MOU correctly, is strictly to make recommendations about which bylaws are out of alignment and recommend to the Senate how to address those. Am I reading that
Yeah,
correctly?
that's correct.
Okay.
So that task force is not charged with
The ELU.
creating an ELU formula or anything like that. So I think it's a little bit yet, remains to be seen exactly how that part will work. But we're working on it. Yeah, so I think that's everything that happened, advisory council, really, that it didn't get on the agenda.
Did we want to talk about the computer science or anything with Sheila, or was that not?
I don't know if it was or not.
Okay, so one discussion that we had was that in computer science, a new person was hired, and she was hired as chair. And so, yeah, that was kind of my face too when I heard that. And apparently that's something that can be done with the administration's approval, and when there are good reasons, and the reasons were that the people in computer science are fairly new and didn't necessarily want to be chair. And so then that person automatically stays chair for 3 years and then has to get voted in just like all the other chairs on campus.
It falls under the bylaws under alternative ways of picking chairs, that the president can appoint a chair with the consent of the faculty, and then that is a 3-year term, and then needs to be reelected.
4.313D.
And then Melissa, in a few minutes, will talk about one other issue that we discussed in some length, that we will be bringing this in 2 weeks. So we'll give you a heads up on that. Anything else, Megan?
I guess maybe in addition to the discussion we had about the professional faculty serving on Senate, for instance, there was one particular case, just as an example, who was mentioned, and the question was, is it in the best interest of that person to serve on Senate? And should that person be on the lighter committee as a new person? So those would be some of the discussions going on, to go back a little bit. Just wanted to add that. That's it.
President Shaw.
My apologies for being late. I had the Medford Chamber in the office and it was hard to get out. Just want to, you got the announcement today, the reminder about the Campus Expo on Friday. Thank you very, very much for those of you who have been involved in any of those PLCs. Look forward to hearing what people have come up with, and I hope you'll make an attempt. I know it's a Friday afternoon, but we picked that because we don't conflict with a lot of classes, and we hope you'll come out and hear what your colleagues have been working on. Quick update on sort of our discussions around tuition and what we're hearing out of the legislature. So we had a finance committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago, and we looked at what would happen with our budget projections if we went with a tuition increase below 5% or one between 5 and 7%. Those would require somewhere between, I think it was $3 million and $5 million worth of cuts on campus if we were to keep tuition at that level, and if we don't add enrollment. Right now, applications are down a bit, confirmations are up by 13%, so we're cautiously a little tiny bit optimistic, but there's a lot of time between now and the fall. So the Tuition Advisory Council is continuing to work, and I don't think we can make those kinds of cuts, so we're probably looking at a higher tuition rate, but we know the problems with that too. So we keep working the legislature. There is talk now, at least, I'm sure you're seeing the news stories around some solution to PERS being considered by the governor, and there's competing solutions to PERS now being put forward. There are also competing revenue proposals being put forward. We pushed really hard to try to get higher ed into the investment package, which is designed for K through 12 education. Governor's supporting that. A lot of legislators are supporting it, but Senate and House leadership is not supporting it. So we just keep working on that. I'm leaving tomorrow to go back up there again and to be talking with people about all of this. So Gene Stallman tells me, we need $120 million to keep our tuition increase below 5% and not have more cuts than we're already doing, as we've been sort of pulling back on spending this year. I haven't made a big deal out of it. We've done it kind of quietly, but we've been doing it. Anyway, Gene thinks we might get to 80 if we're lucky. So not 120, maybe to 80. So there's a big gap there, and we just have to do the best we can and monitor that. And then once we have a better idea of what the picture is, really try to work hard to figure out how we're going to manage it. So I'm sorry to be negative about that, but it's really, the big chunk of this is out of our control, and we're working hard on what is in our influence. Yeah, Carol?
So when would the university put forward a proposal based on tuition, whether
We will take our vote on tuition on May 16th.
Okay.
And we'll have people from the Higher Education Coordinating Commission at that meeting. There's a finance committee meeting and then a full board meeting. And what we will probably do is what we did 2 years ago. We'll say, if funding is this, tuition will be that. If funding is this, tuition will be that. We'll approve a sort of of options there.
So will Senate see those proposals before you do that vote on May 16th? We have-
Senate doesn't have, I mean, there's
No,
no
but just to-
obligation. It's all, if you're interested in what the TAC is working on, all the minutes and stuff are up on the president's page. You can go find the Tuition Advisory Council. The board meetings, of course, are open. The pro forma is,
Well, Mark Dennehy used to come and tell us that information prior to a vote, as I recall. So I'm just asking, that's not gonna
Yeah.
happen.
I don't know, I'll take
Okay.
that back. If there's time and we can fit it in, we're happy to come. I think Greg or Josh would be happy to come and go through what we're looking at.
Yeah. I think it would be good for faculty to know in case the students ask us where it is.
And we're, we've done several open forums where we've gone over this for faculty, staff, and for students. We're doing more for students. We're doing a social media campaign. So you can help us by trying to get students to come out and engage with that. A few other things quickly. I was gone the last week, first to the Association of Governing Boards with a couple of our trustees, and then to, first that one. Lots of great information there for trustees, but the keynote session was by a guy from Disney talking about the importance of creativity. And so our work in that area and how we're sort of talking about positioning ourselves is right in line with what they were hearing. Then I went to the Council of State Representatives for ASCU because I represent Oregon. Lots of work around the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. Probably, my guess is it still won't happen, but they're talking about it and they're having hearings and they're trying to, one cool thing they're talking about is some kind of a new federal funding that would be a federal state matching program. So states could get money from the feds depending on what the state contribution was to higher education. So that's a way to leverage, to push pressure on states to do a better job of funding higher ed. There's a lot of concern around the Department of Education's guidance on campus sexual assault. They got a ton of comments. They're reading through those and thinking about how to revise that. There's talk of accreditation changing. I haven't had a time to talk to Jody about this, but they're considering making it easier for groups to become national accreditors, not regional accreditors, and also allowing places to choose their own regional accreditor so that we wouldn't be bound by Northwest. We could pick a different one. So I don't know if that's going to happen or really what's behind that, but sort of interesting. Focus at Department of Education is on students, strengthening innovation, focusing on student completion, modernizing financial aid, really concerned about student outcomes, concerned about free speech. And then a couple of really interesting experimental programs. The Department of Education has the ability to create what are called experimental sites. And one of those I think might be of real interest, well maybe two, but one is coming out very soon and it's around the use of federal work study off campus and loosening some of the constraints around that so that if you're placing a student in an internship or something off campus, that we might be able to, instead of having the student do that as unpaid, use federal work study to help the employer compensate the student for that work. So I think that'd be really good for our kind of institution and our students. So that's something we're going to definitely keep an eye out on and look at. And then there's work around income sharing agreements. I don't know if you've heard anything about these. Basically, for a place like us, it would be when students have exhausted financial aid, that we have an agreement with them that they will repay us once they're employed, that we take on, we give them money and then we get a portion of their earnings back. So it's like a loan, but there's not interest on it, and if they default, the university pays, not them. So we're exploring that right now to see if that is something that would be beneficial. We think particularly to one, students who have trouble accessing aid, so DACA students, Dreamer students that can't access aid in other ways, and two, for students who have exhausted their aid, rather than having to drop out and go to work and save up money, that this might be an option for them. So lots of stuff going on in the federal scene. Any questions? It was a lot to learn. You're welcome.
What's elections committee stuff?
Okay, so this will be brief. The chair elections are going on, the Senate elections, I think, have started too. We've got nominations pouring in for both of those. Everyone will be voting via Qualtrics once it's all the nominations are in and everybody's agreed to run or said, no, thank you, I am not going to. Did you?
I do have a question. So for the Senate ones, is there going to be an email for the at-large position?
There will be, but we usually vote
Do
on
the
them
individuals?
first,
Okay.
because then people know, you
Okay.
know, like if they ran in their program or whatever, to win, then they can,
That makes sense.
okay, right? All right, so, one thing that kind of came up, through this process, but then also came up in advisory council as well, is that sometimes you have faculty who are in more than one program, or maybe they have a home department, but they're doing a lot of classes in the HCA. And so kind of deciding who votes on what is an issue that's come up. There isn't really anything in the bylaws about whether or not you can vote in like 2 chair elections or run for a Senate seat from different divisions if you're in 2 different divisions. It turns out that all the people who have double appointments, they also, I think they're all in also different divisions, or maybe there's one that's the same, but, so that's kind of an interesting wrinkle to this process. There have been many interesting wrinkles to this process that we were not expecting. So, we're kind of working that out. That's, at some point, that's probably something that'll have to get fixed in the bylaws so that it's more clear going forward, like when exactly can you vote in which things. And then, did you want to mention?
Sure.
HCA?
So, as you all know, the HCA program came forward and gave us a report a couple of sessions ago. And after that, I got an email from HCA faculty asking for a chair election. And so this led to sort of an interesting investigation, discussion, and an advisory council. One of the concerns around that was that Craig Swissler has the title of program coordinator, but the way he was selected and actually his role doesn't match program coordinator as defined in the bylaws. And so in our discussion, we came to the conclusion that it was never actually intended that he would be the same thing as what that role is. It's just that sort of the name program coordinator was just picked. So the advisory council has recommended to the provost, and I think she was fairly amenable to this suggestion, that anyone who's serving in that administrative role, who's not matching the bylaws, if their title is program coordinator, we need a new title for that. So there's some discussion about what that means. What that still leaves is this issue of HCA asking for a chair election. And so there's been some discussion about what that means, and the bylaws lay out very clearly how faculty select a chair, but it doesn't really say under what circumstances faculty who just don't currently have a chair say we want a chair, and who has to approve that, or that kind of thing. And it again goes to this issue of the fact that everyone who teaches in HCA has a home program and a home chair. And currently HCA doesn't have a prefix. They only have courses that are also approved through other programs. We talked about it for a long time in advisory council, and have reached out to some other people for input. And ultimately we think it really is a discussion for the full Senate. Not only the specific case of HCA, should HCA be allowed to have a chair election, their own chair, but also we clearly need better bylaws language around this question, because other people may raise this in the future. So for instance, if there are programs that share chairs, like Creative Arts, where EMDA, art, and creative writing all share a chair. If one of those majors decided, well, actually we want our own chair, can they just do that, or does it need administrative approval, or so we want to find out a little more information about this and what we think as a faculty senate, how this should be handled. So I'm gonna try to save a fair amount of time on our next agenda to have a good discussion about this. So definitely be talking amongst yourselves and with other faculty about their thoughts about how to handle this.
So, I just need clarity, so healthcare administration is what you're talking about. And that's so it's a new department, but we don't call them department, new program that was created last year,
2 years.
2 years
Yes.
ago.
This is the second.
It's its
We're in the
year.
second year, yeah.
Right. So, and it is primarily made up of faculty from all sorts of different disciplines.
In different divisions, yeah.
From different divisions. And they have, didn't they just ask for one, they have a permanent professional track person and they're doing a search for another?
There isn't a permanent person right now.
But I thought they did a search for a
They're
tenure track.
They're going to be searching in the fall, I believe. And as last I checked, they had not determined yet what that description is or what the.
But that person, wasn't that person in that tenure track position supposed to be like overseeing that program? So it's kind of reminiscent of the computer science searching for a chair because they're a very small program
Right.
and they didn't have very established faculty yet. Like, couldn't that be the same kind of thing?
This is
I
kind of
mean-
one of the questions.
Yeah.
Seems like we ought to have bylaws about this because,
Yeah.
for example, GSWS, a good
Yes, it's gonna be.
analog, they're a program that most of their faculty, I think all actually, have a home program somewhere else, maybe all.
Yeah, but the director is dual, director, co-director.
Right. Point being though, that they do have a faculty, they have a program
We have a program coordinator.
coordinator. And so it seems like that type of program shouldn't be without, for instance, you're gonna have faculty looking at, you're gonna have faculty course evaluations and curriculum to be vetted and so forth. And that's something I personally believe a faculty leader ought to be leading. And right now, they don't have that.
The one distinct thing there, which is what sort of came out, was as of right now, there is no HCA prefix. So, for instance, anyone who would be reviewing the course evals would be in the home program, which presumably the faculty there had a role in voting for that chair. But, you know, I've heard that they may be looking at the possibility of eventually having their own prefix courses as well. So, again, I agree that I did note to Sue that, and I think she agreed, that the bylaws certainly lean towards the preference that faculty should be supervised by other faculty. That, you know, before a division director, that there should be, you know, the best choice is an elected chair or an elected chair appointed program coordinator. Obviously, there are exceptions in cases where a chair can't be found, so a chair is appointed, but the preference leans towards faculty supervising the faculty, so I think that's what we want.
So potentially in the future, when we hear about, when it's brought to Senate for a new program, maybe that's where we should start. Like say, well, how are you planning on potentially staffing this? And how are, since you're an entity that doesn't have in-house faculty, instead, we always do the opposite. We then blame the bylaws and say, well, it's not clarified in here, but it is. It's just that this is a new situation. So we don't question it in here.
Right, and the program coordinator, Craig's position was in that proposal,
Yeah.
which we voted for, although under program proposals, the Senate is really, our role there is
Yeah.
approving curriculum
Right.
primarily. So
Right.
even though that was in there, it's not something that we don't really approve that part.
Right.
But we could have asked more questions. Any other questions about that? Like I said, we're going to have a big discussion about it. Is anyone here from SSIU? All right. That brings us to the program report on the wine business certificate, which we didn't have time to get to last time. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm from Vienna, from Brady, I don't know you. So the certificate in wine business was introduced last academic year, so it's in its second year. And currently we have 13 students pursuing the certificate and 3 graduates. So on wine were offered in winter and spring last year, so kind of half through the year. So having 3 graduates already, I think it's pretty good, and the projection is 10 to 15 per year, which I think we're on track to meet that. The courses, the specific courses which are focusing on wine were a little more full last year, but still about 20 students or so this year. Interesting fact, maybe you can help with that, a lot of students in the courses last year were from different departments outside of business, and this year it's more business focused. So there is a certificate in one business if you want to tell your students. And then another fun fact, I'm not in touch with the 3rd graduate, but 2 of the 3 graduates, one of them works as a sales manager in Aurora Vines in Talent, and also works with PCP. And the other one is off on an adventure in Australia looking for a job in the wine industry there. Any questions? We're doing a lot of kind of being part of different events and a lot of marketing materials. And then we have an article in one wine scene. Everybody's interested. This came out a week or so.
Lady, one question I know that I've heard from some people, and I don't know if anyone wants to speak up about it or not, but I'm just going to.
Sure.
I know that when this was approved, Greg Jones was here,
Yeah.
and he was actually, even though he's a division director, was going to be teaching some classes. How did his departure impact the course offerings? Were you able to staff the courses that you needed to staff and all that?
Yeah, for the most part, there have been challenges, but so the 4 core classes which are specifically related to wine are taught by industry professionals. So I think that I think students actually like that because it brings, they bring real examples. They go on field trips from the wineries to see how wine is made and learn about the business. So I mean, there have been challenges, but I think managing for now.
Yeah, Lena, you said there's 13 students that are getting the
Currently,
certificate.
13 are enrolled pursuing the certificate. Yeah.
Currently
And they are
enrolled.
at different stages. Some have declared last term, and some are about to finish it.
Andrew, can I, the strange segue question. Mail trip this morning, major article on universities in the United States actually moving on beyond, if you will, the sort of wine certificate stuff and moving on into cannabis, marijuana. Are we doing any planning on that front at this moment?
Oh, I don't know why you're asking me.
You're the one standing
She just presented a paper at a conference about
up. Okay, so you are the right person.
I did some studies, but that's not.
I have said to several, I keep saying, we're a major producing area, major consumption area. We probably ought to be looking at offering something. UC Davis has a program. There are places developing these programs that are quite reputable. They do science, they do policy. I think it's something we ought to look at, but, the president doesn't design curriculum, so.
Just saying from the chemistry department with a lot of jobs in extraction in the valley that are not currently being filled by chemists. We have been thinking about this, and I think there's a huge market for us to put students into jobs that are currently being filled by people that have not been trained in a chemical lab. They think they know what they're talking about, but they don't know what the words mean when they try to have the conversation with you.
That article was excellent, by the way, on exactly that topic we're talking about. It was a really comprehensive article.
So it is an area where I think there are a lot of potentials.
And that was a major, that wasn't even just a certificate, that was major. Major.
Some of them were certificates,
No.
and a lot of them were in the Midwest.
Right, yeah.
Why should the
UC
Midwest
Davis-
lead?
What?
Why should the Midwest lead?
They have lousy weed.
We'll have the task force and marijuana major on the next agenda, but any other questions about the wine business certificate before we move on to the next agenda?
One more quick comment that the wine business certificate is also open for community members starting fall. So, you don't have to be an SOU student. And I just confirmed this morning that financial aid is available even if you're pursuing this certificate. So I'm currently working with a couple of students who have reached out and interested community members pursuing the certificate. So hopefully we'll handle that.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, you said, because it was raised by Andrew about Greg Jones's initiated this the certificate, and he's going to teach these core classes that you're using industry professionals. So how did it, do they come in as adjuncts? What is the deal? How are they doing it volunteer? What are they doing? I'm just curious.
As an adjunct, yeah.
Last question from you.
Just in a similar vein, we have a professor in the chemistry department who also looks at wine, right? And so we could have some interesting student interactions between our students and yours that probably aren't happening yet, that we can start advertising the connections there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. All right, next up we have the academic policy proposal on post-bac catalog year. So that's, as a reminder, is the policy that clarifies that when you come back for a post-bac, your catalog year starts over at the year you're admitted to the post-bac. So do we have a motion on that?
I move we approve the policy change.
Lori seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the proposed policy, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Thank you. All right, next up we have undergraduate curriculum proposals that were introduced on the 8th. Do we have a motion to approve that package of proposals?
I have actually had to change something on a biology course.
Oh, okay. One of your courses?
Well, it's not the course I teach.
Okay.
Is that the one we're looking at? All
Mhm.
those list of courses?
Should we move to approve and then you amend?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just wanted to
I'll
put it
move
out
to
there.
approve.
All right, Kendall motion for a second. Discussion?
So, I noticed that something was left off of one of the new courses proposed in biology, it's 5:30. I'm not expecting you to memorize these, but it's neurodegeneration and biology of aging. And what was left off is that could be a capstone course. So there should be language, so I spoke with the professor who was teaching it, Reeve Paddock. And it was in the original language and somehow it got left out when this came to us.
By 4:30, you said?
Yes, by 4:30, so it should say at the end of the class description,
Okay.
research intensive course that may be used to satisfy biology capstone requirement. And so the students wouldn't have known that if they see that unless that's.
So that goes to the catalog description
Yes.
before the prerequisite?
Yes.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah,
You want
do
me
you
to
mind?
repeat it?
Just one time.
Sure. Research intensive course that may be used to satisfy biology capstone requirement. Does that help? That's my friendly.
I view it as friendly.
Thank you.
I've got one question. So I was looking at that, all of the courses and reading them, and kind of want to take some of them, but
The aging one?
no.
You have enough of that.
One of the questions I had that I noticed, at least for CCJ courses, is that there was a prereq of 103, USUM 103, which, without being discussed, the question that I have in a general sense is, if Senate approves this curriculum courses with these prereqs, and what's to stop departments from then changing the prereqs? Do we have to approve all of that?
Yeah, any change of prereq comes back to Senate, so it has to go back through curriculum committee, comes back to Senate as a change of prereq.
That's the formal process,
Yeah.
okay.
No, it's correct.
Okay.
Any other discussion of the,
Actually, I agree.
okay,
And again, it's in biology,
okay.
so, there are 2 courses that are offered in biology that are now on this list, like 383 and 384, and they're integration classes. And I don't know if there's anybody here that could speak to this process, but they were proposed by a affiliate faculty, Jim Bowers, who is the AAAS
Right.
executive director. I wasn't here when he proposed these, or actually I was already done with it, but in our department, I was in SPAC. So I'm just wondering, when a course comes forward from an adjunct, how does curriculum committee look at it differently? Or do they say, okay, that's okay to put an adjunct's name associated with this course because the adjunct doesn't have a permanent relationship with the institution? So I'm just kind of concerned that you just get a bunch of courses that sit there, and if that person leaves, what do you do with that? So, did somebody address that?
Can tell you
Oh.
that on curricular committee, your chair, Roden,
Yeah.
stuck up strongly for those courses when I did ask about the fact that this was not one of our professors that were bringing this forward. And he said that these classes had already been taught by that professor and that he thought he would even be comfortable teaching them in the future if they were not taught by him. So we did talk about those things, and he argued strongly for these classes getting approved. But we did not talk about if he were to leave, whose
Right.
name would then be associated with that.
Well, and I spoke to John Roden
Right.
before I came here.
Right.
I told him I was gonna raise this.
Right, and so we did bring that up at curricular
Well, I
committee
can
for
tell you for
a
a
little
fact
while.
that John Roden could not teach how and why the animals behave. But
Yeah.
I don't know if he knew the exact, my real question is, how is that normally handled at curriculum committee level? When it's an adjunct's name put onto a course that, why do we have these courses if we just keep kind of like shifting them all around? And I don't know, is Lee here?
Well, Jody
On
can,
integration?
Speak to this a little bit. Well, I'm gonna get back to the question about adjunct and affiliate, which are
Okay.
not the same thing.
Yeah, I know.
So I just want to clarify that, and I think having a course proposal come forward from an adjunct, for example, a year-long maybe. So I think there's a lot of ways to parse the classification. Affiliate faculty member is somebody, in this case, with whom there is thought to be a significant enough relationship that it would make some sense to have him teach this. Our understanding also from curriculum committee, and it does come up. But as has been noted, curriculum committee is a curricular body, not a workload management body.
Right.
So it would be, I think,
They're just
unrealistic.
looking at that.
Well, no, I mean, I think it would be unrealistic for curriculum committee to not consider whether or not instructional resource would permit the teaching of this class, but it also does not necessarily grant the approval of a course as curriculum to be a requirement that the program teach it. And so what I'm saying is that while we have a course that's approved to be taught, it's approved for university studies, there's no obligation for it to
It
be.
will be offered.
Correct, and after a certain period of time, if it's not offered, then the program's under the requirement to drop it out of the catalog, either by suspension or permanent deletion. So while I think it's a really, I think it's a great question, it's a great concern to have, I want to just remind you that there's no, this does not compel the program to say, yes, we staff that. We wouldn't approve a new program if we didn't have staff for it, but of course, absolutely, and in some cases, we have to do it. And I think this was one of them, and I'm wanting, someone help me here, I'm looking over at this side of the room to remind me, this has been a $3.99 that has been taught.
Special topics, we put in
Yeah, this was-
special topics.
This was hard numbering course that had been taught a couple of times, so there was a
Cut it
requirement
once,
as well.
it was a special topic.
I know that sometimes we also just have classes that just say an adjunct is going to teach them, but there's not a specific name assigned with it, but they still want that course that we've approved things as well.
Yeah,
Um,
well, obviously this went through university studies too.
So Dad, do you want-
I was just gonna speak to that. It got to university studies, got stalled, and we were actually just discussing in our last meeting to bring Jim in to have him talk about it, because part of the problem here with an adjunct is, how do you deal with that? Well, regular faculty have trouble dealing with the template sometimes, and I think a new person has a much more difficult time with it, and it looked like that. We wanted to bring him in to actually talk with him about that, because it did not get approved, it was turned down. But it was turned down with the possibility of resubmitting it, revising, resubmit. And, but we wanted to bring him in there because, to just hand it back,
So he did revise it, is what you're saying?
no.
This is for approval for curriculum, not for university studies.
Yeah, there's two different.
So voting for it today does not mean it's approved for university studies. It means that this course can appear in the catalog and be offered.
Oh, because it says integration strand eight.
Sometimes
It's-
faculty, when they're writing the description, will put that in there in the course proposal, but that does not mean it's actually approved.
So it has not been approved for integration.
It has been
Okay, now I'm really
submitted.
confused.
So that's
So-
that'll be a separate vote, and will come back through university studies, and we can vote for it there.
So should this description not include
We
that?
should probably make a
About-
note
yeah.
that that description is not.
Okay, then that's a big deal, because then that implies it's a hard number course in the department.
But part of your question is a really good question, because we have this happen on the other side of things
Sure.
more than on the front side of things. We have somebody propose it, like Renee could propose something, they come through, we pass it based on Renee teaching this,
Right.
and Renee's an expert in this particular
And then he
course,
doesn't
and
teach
then
it
he
again.
passes it off,
Yeah.
and we have no idea nor any kind of an
Yeah.
assessment of that. And that could go down a few lines too.
So I have to do another friendly amendment.
Sure. So for the, what are the course numbers again? That's
There's 383 and 384, it should remove the integration strand H
For both?
from both, it's on both.
they're not approved.
They're not. Well, I guess how we said it is proposed for university
Yes,
studies,
it's-
but that still is not,
Patrick, by the way, this gets cut.
That's what we normally do.
Yeah. So you don't have to worry about it. It is something that gets cut. This does not mean it's
Yeah, it
somehow
will
a
not
back
be.
door.
well, worries me, actually. Okay, I trust you. Okay.
Any other discussion of the motion on the table? All those in favor of approving the undergraduate curriculum committee package, please indicate so by raising your hand.
With the,
With the friendly amendment, thank you.
There's other classes that have that proposed universities, that kind of
All those opposed to the approval of the curriculum package with the friendly amendment? Any abstentions? All right, so the motion passes, thank you. Moving on, we have, anyone like to make a motion on the graduate curriculum package introduced on the 8th?
what is in that package?
That would be, that'd be MBA Communication and Education. Those are the catalog changes to MBA, and then new courses from communication and education.
Somebody,
So we have a second from Chad.
we have a discussion.
Discussion, yes.
No. Yes, maybe you can enlighten me on, and maybe this isn't in that package, the science in the New York Times.
Kim is here.
Oh, okay.
Perhaps speak to that.
All I wanted to know is if you were considering striking out Linda Hologass's name because she retired.
Of course.
And her name is listed second.
Yes.
So that would be,
Yeah,
okay, that's my friendly amendment to that one.
sure.
Update it, make it current. And you have a new, you should have the name of the new faculty member in there.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all.
Right.
So this was for the MBA. I just had a question, and maybe this was discussed last year, but why is there a separation of online MBA and evening? How come students can't take them at the same time?
Well, the curriculum is the same for both,
Yep.
but the separation really is because of the structure, the financial structure of the two programs. And as you know, the ABN, the online MBA is in partnership with a private organization, whereas the evening is, strictly SOU. Because of, I think, financial aid policies and regulations, that we really cannot mix these two together.
And that's because of the partnership we have?
Oh, well, that's one is partnership, and then the other is financial aid.
Okay, because I know, while I was reading it, it said that students can, one time,
Correct.
go switch.
Correct,
But they
because
can't-
it makes it difficult for one registrar's office to really keep track of, the academic calendar for these two programs. They're different. So operationally, from a financial aid as well as registrar's point of view, it's going to be very difficult to keep them, so allow students to switch back and forth. And the other is an arrangement with academic.
But they can't switch one.
They can switch once, yeah. And
Which
students
way?
are- Either way, correct.
Has there been anybody that has switched?
Oh, yeah, we've had some evening students who, local students that are full-time, employees, and they say that online is more convenient for their schedules. Because they realize that, the curriculum is the same for both, the rigor is the same. Actually, the online is more rigorous because we compress an 11-week program into 7 weeks. So those are the things that they.
But nobody, do you know of anybody that switched from the online only to the evening?
No, it's mostly.
It's only like 2 or 3 that made that jump though, right?
Or border, from evening to.
Yeah.
Probably, I'd say 5 at least.
That was the only question that I had.
Any other questions or
Sure.
discussion?
So Renee, the opportunity for SIU employees who want to do the thing, was segregation there for them?
That's something that's still being considered. That's beyond my pay scale, Charles. Sorry.
Okay. I'm kind of 0 for 2 today, I'll see if I can do that.
Any other discussion of the proposed graduate curriculum package? All those in favor of the graduate curriculum package with the amendment of striking the entire packet number from the proposals, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, package passes. Now we have new graduate curriculum proposals that we are considering for a vote, will be eligible for a vote in 2 weeks. So those would be a large chunk of classes for education, very large, and some additional changes, some additional language from the business curriculum, including some additional prerequisites and looks like course description change for one of the courses. Any questions for the folks in the room today regarding those that we'll be discussing further and voting on in 2 weeks? Education's been busy.
Could I provide just an overview?
Sure.
Just because there is such a lot, it might be helpful in the reading.
Absolutely.
So some of the catalog changes that you'll notice in the overall big picture, starting with the big picture of the program, is one, clarifying that we do not offer an MED program. In fact, we offer a Master's of Science in Education, which is a very different. So a lot of changes you'll see went through clarifying actually the degree we do offer, what we have in the catalog. We also updated our program goals to not only just be more reflective and current of what is happening in today's world, but also to align to our strategic shifts in our themes and cores. And so we introduced 3 new fully online concentrations, and it was done to really look at being responsive to our area and the economy. One is early childhood, leaderships in early childhood, and the need for, Kim speak to it, Dr. Kim speak to it, but it's really needing for leaders in that field with master's degrees. The second one is for our K-12 teachers, for them to get a master's in curriculum instruction, specifically in STEM education. Again, a real need, all of these looking fully online. And the third one for a master's in adult learning, for folks that are not interested in public school K-12, but are really looking at education more broadly, whether it's higher education or working in a kind of professional development and nonprofit or in museums or whatever it might be. So those are kind of the 3 big new program concentrations that we're offering. There's one new course proposal within our core, which means everyone who receives a Master's of Science in Education must take this course. It is a class that we revised to update it to be diversity in the workplace. So it's really K-12, higher ed, or any public sector of how do you work with clients, students in the workplace, learners in the workplace. So those are the big 3. We also had a modification we separated our thesis and our project into 503A and 503B. So that's just to manage that. And the second piece, all of the online courses, there's one, what did you call it, Carol? A little friendly amendment. All 3 of these new concentrations, we are required, when they ask that question, is it restricted to majors? We said no, the answer is actually yes. We had a meeting with Matt Stillman and a bunch of other folks that really, it'll be open to other folks that can take these classes, but they have to contact the instructor prior to. So we want to open it up, but we want to restrict the majors initially for reporting purposes, and also because all of these fully online courses will be offered in the same way the MBA is offering in an intensified 7-week period. So folks that are in the concentration, they will already be used to that 7-week piece, but if someone from outside wants to come in and take it, we don't want them surprised. We want them to have to contact the instructor so we can explain, okay, but this is part of a 7-week intensified piece. Yeah.
So when you said 7-week period, maybe think, so are these going to be part of this academic program?
It is. These 3 concentrations will be part of continuing the academic partnership.
So you guys are doing that also, that has
With
now
only-
been solidified?
Only with these 3 concentrations. So if you notice in the proposal, we still are offering all of our other concentrations.
Right.
But the 3 fully online concentrations will be in the 7-week accelerated.
So do you have to hire your faculty to do these
No.
3
We
new
have-
online?
No, because we already have been doing this, kind of what we've called more like general, and you'll see the last one, in general, where folks put together their own masters of education, kind of like an interdisciplinary, and these 3 really came out. So we have folks at faculty that are really committed and are interested in working with these areas.
Any other questions for Amy? Are they getting coaches too?
That'll be up to faculty to decide. We don't know whether or not we'll find it necessary
Because
to
the
do it
enrollment.
or not. Our enrollment's gonna look really different than perhaps the MBA. But, we're looking at 3 distinct populations of folks that really need an online option. Our early childhood folks across the state and nation, our licensed teachers focusing on STEM, and then folks looking at adult education that are really needing kind of a master's degree, almost an interdisciplinary, but with the idea of program development and assessment being key, and the adult learner. So lots of good reading, but I thought you'd want at least an overview, Carol.
So this actually concerns me because I do believe when business came to us with their academic partnership MBA, so this is different because they're not, it's a concentration, so they're not getting a master's?
Yeah, they're getting a Master's of Science in Education, but the
Okay,
concentration
so when
in.
business did that, they had to bring that whole proposal to us initially so we could look at it and see how it could impact. So are we like beyond that now because we've accepted this partnership with?
No, that's what we are reading to you.
So, okay, so we will still have some discussion about whether this is a good thing to do, or you guys already decided, you think it's pretty good, you're all on board? Because it was not that way with business, as I recall, we were.
Well, and we have a lot of colleagues here that will speak to that as well, but I think that the primary concern with brought the MBA program forward, we didn't bring a new online program in. We had an existing program, but we had to make some changes to things like admission requirements.
Right.
So I think it was, that was the impetus for a larger set of discussions. But essentially what education is bringing forward is analogous to what business brought forward in order. In fact, I think it was less curriculum because, this is a lot.
Right, well, we've been really excited about revising our MS Ed. We've been starting this process actually before we were contacted by AP. And it was a direction we felt really comfortable going because they were willing to do what we wanted. So we wanted to put forth these options, and with their support, we have some opportunities to support faculty developing some courses, and some flexibility. And it's been different, we really appreciate MBA coming first. So we have opportunities where, these folks can take these classes that are not connected to AP, as they contact the instructor first. So we have a little bit of flexibility, but it's really, we're excited about giving some new programs, but this is out there.
So, being a quantitative person, it seems to me that when business brought theirs forward, they kind of gave us a sort of, this is our enrollments now, and this is what we hope the enrollments will be with the partnership. And just a sense of why, frankly, it would make sense to give half of our tuition away. And, cutting to the chase, it was because we hoped that with their marketing efforts, we'd increase enrollments enough that it would offset only getting half the tuition.
Yeah,
I'm not asking you to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, honest, Kimball, all we're excited about is getting some new curriculum and updating what we've been doing and offer these concentrations. John King couldn't be here tonight, and maybe he can be there, or maybe Jody or someone else could talk about it. But from a faculty perspective, we were just interested in being able to offer these concentrations, teach these classes to the students we want to in these 3 areas.
Fair enough. Yeah, so that is my question, even if you're not the right person to answer it. I would like to hear, because I remember Dennis was saying to us that the current face-to-face version of some of the options was not enrolling well, and
Our MS Ed program was dying on the vine. It really was. And so this allows us to provide a core that all of our master's students can take. So whether you're getting your ESOL license or administrative license or special ed license, whatever they are, they'll take this core, which is offered in the 7-week extended piece, right? And it allows a lot of folks to be able to, more students to take it versus 2 or 3. But then it allows us to invest in these new concentrations.
I'll make a comment about your comment, and that is, the state of Oregon took away the requirement for teachers, licensed teachers, to have a master's degree about 5 years ago. And so the online, our MED program, which is MSED program.
MS Ed, we're all relearning this.
That program was mostly online, except during the summer when teachers could come and get graduate credits when they're not working regular hours during the school year. But when the state of Oregon took away the requirement to have a master's degree to teach in Oregon, they still need to get professional development, 45 credits worth of professional development within like 7 years or something like that. but they don't have to have a master's degree. And so that pretty much like wiped the potential growth of that program in our regional area. And so that's one of the key things that sort of drove our interest in how could this, and how can we expand without, you know, all the marketing that goes into it solely from SOU's point of view.
I've been calling Kimball, and we are 10 minutes over time right now, and I'm going to work to make sure that we can get some more education folks here to answer additional questions before any vote. But Kimball, what's your question?
That was you addressed part of my concern. I mean, it makes sense to me. On the other hand, now you're telling me there'll be a core that everybody takes in the 7-week, and I guess, so I have more questions about how much AP is bleeding off from us, frankly. I'll just say it that way. I mean, if all of your master's students now take these 7-week courses, does half of the tuition, all those courses go to them? And then, so these are questions I have. They don't need to be answered now,
But they should be answered
yeah,
before we
absolutely. I want them
make a vote.
addressed.
Well, and please, and in the proposals, I mean, I know you probably, since they just got you, you didn't get a chance to really read through any of it. So in the different program proposals, you'll see a lot, I think a lot of your questions will be answered. And in just one quick one is, in response to what Dennis said, it really, those 3 concentrations were supported by a lot of current legislation around early childhood, a lot of support and incentivizing for our STEM students, and then a huge need for folks that need kind of an interdisciplinary master's, that we were coming to us anyway saying, hey, I need a master's, I really want to work in blank, that had nothing to do with K-12. So it's being really responsive for those 3 concentrations.
And I think, Kimball, some of your questions will be answered in the proposal, but some of those are things that we've wrestled with at the committee level, at the department level, and so we've been having these conversations, so hopefully we can pull together some, you know, a summary of numbers that might be useful to the
And I will say that in the final analysis, faculty stopped worrying about the financial part, because if the administration was going to support it, we were going to support the revision of our program.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we use it as an impetus for our program. Total revision, it matches the strategic goals, it matches the track data, it matches like all our goals within education and these concentrations. So we just took it as an opportunity, and because we had these other complexities of, say, special education and ESOL, we built it all around all those exceptions as well. So we became kind of like happy for the opportunity.
How did you not think about the financial piece?
Yeah,
At the same
we
time.
stopped thinking about the financial piece if the administration was going to accept it. So.
And can you do me a favor and just double check in that folder that I do have everything that faculty need to review, because we've had some issues, some things trickling from graduate council, not all in one pack. I just want to make sure that nothing's
It's all
missing.
there with the little amendment to the program proposals that say, is this restricted to a major? And the answer to those are yes, not no. So other than that, and I can resend that piece to you, or you can simply write yes instead of no. You've got everything.
Okay.
And if there's questions that you have that may be beyond curriculum, that deal more with some of the other financial policies, it'd be nice to maybe have John King or Jody or someone let them know what you guys need.
Thank you. All right, now we have new university studies proposals, which again, we are not voting on today, but Dale, you want to introduce those to us?
There's 2 courses coming forward. One's the sociology of sports, which is a global diversity and global awareness one. And then there's an H-strand course as well, and that one is the environmental writing, which is English 383. Both courses passed unanimously. They both fit really well. So there wasn't any conflict over. It wasn't a 4-3 vote or anything like that.
Any questions?
Yeah, Dale, I had a question about the SOAN course.
Yeah.
The sport, what is it called?
Sociology of sport.
Sociology of sport. I read through, I did a deep dive on this, which I usually don't do, but I have a lot of experience in this area. I don't think that the course description matches the topics that are covered or the goals of the strength.
Actually.
And I think if I didn't have as much trouble with the content of the course as with the description, because if the description drives the course, then it should be more inclusive of those terms that are in the strand goals.
Why are you saying it doesn't apply to the strand goals?
Well, the strand goals, like say,
I mean, go ahead.
The strand goals speak to, say, power structures or inequities or basically unfairness and global connections as well. The word global or other countries is not in the description at all. You know, like comparing cultures from other countries. And sport has that intercultural integration component that is really important in the strand. But it's in the materials of the course, but not in the description. And so I just had an issue with the description not being inclusive. I'm thinking of like, the thing that really stuck out to me was like that word sexism in the description.
Right.
I was thinking of how athletes, transgender athletes are causing some issue in women's sports in particular, because they might have an advantage or something. So that is like a really great thing to talk about. But that's in the goals, but not in the description, right? Any hint of that? Because some of the athletes are from different countries. Some of the athletes are high school. It's really important and an interesting course, but not in the description. It doesn't really grab me there.
Well, actually, it did, because it's a lot of it's sometimes talking about what's counted as sport in a society versus what's not. It's driven partially by gender, partially by race, partially by culture. Well, are you looking at the full,
Yes,
like
the
the syllabus as well, or are you just looking at the?
I'm looking at the description.
Description.
The word gender is not in there.
Dan, who proposed the course?
It was proposed by Larry Gibbs.
Do you think it's possible that we might be able to shoot an email to Larry? Because a lot of times with these kinds of concerns, it's pretty easy to work offline with the faculty.
Oh,
members
yeah, I
with
mean,
concerns.
I'm sure it can be just with a few different words, another little descriptor. I mean, it's basically, to me, okay, but I mean, I would approve the course, but I don't think it attracts, you know, the diverse audience that it could if you have different words in there.
That's an interesting concept, the way you just said that. Because I don't necessarily know if we're trying to attract diverse.
Well, that's the strand.
No,
Diversity.
That's not what the strand is doing. It's not trying to attract diversity. It's trying to expose people to diversity. If you went through, a course, it might be one of your few opportunities to be exposed to some kind of diverse curriculum piece. And that's what it's really. It's not to attract a diverse group in there.
Well,
So
the content, if the content is diverse in nature, it would attract diverse audience.
Well, so I don't know that we'll solve this debate right now in Senate. So my recommendation is would be to reach out to Larry Gibbs and we can maybe be able to have an offline discussion that resolves the difficulty. Any other questions about any of the university studies courses proposed?
Who's the faculty member that proposed the other course?
It's Marilyn.
Is it Marilyn?
Yeah, Marilyn.
Linda. Thanks.
Yeah, you said do not attract diversity. What do you mean?
What I mean is the courses are designed for anyone in the curriculum, not just to attract somebody with a diverse background. Like It said one thing in here, that it's there to attract people who are both sport players and non-sport players. That's one way you could say that, but that's not really the design is. With any diversity course, it's really to expose somebody to an aspect of diversity and global awareness. And if you're playing sports, I mean, take a soccer game. Go out to the fields in a soccer game, and you're going to see almost every culture represented in a typical game. And when you see that, you'll see that culture represented in a different way. You do
But I don't see that in the description. I don't see other cultures from different countries in there, in the description.
So I'm gonna move on to any other concerns with these courses. I think we've heard this concern.
Okay.
Brian, did you?
Nope.
Nope, okay. All right, we're gonna move on, and this will come back on the agenda in 2 weeks. Next up, we have 2 proposed changes to faculty bylaws. These are items that have been discussed at previous Senate meetings, and now this is the draft language. So the older of the two is something we discussed way back in fall about making changes to the required review for term-by-term faculty. Again, the concern was the fact that most term-by-term faculty, of course, don't give any kind of teaching presentation to be hired in a term-by-term role. Sometimes they are hired and it is the first time they're ever teaching. And the current bylaws only require evaluation once every 3 years or at least once every 45 credits. So it is entirely possible for someone who's never taught before to come to SOU and not receive an evaluation until they've taught 45 credits of courses. And so a proposed amendment is to add that term-by-term faculty will be evaluated in the first quarter they teach at SOU, then again, at least once every 3 years, or at least once every 45 credits thereafter. So that is that proposed language. And then the other bylaw is designed to address the concerns that Mary Ann brought up about sort of a misalignment between what Committee on Committees is actually doing and can reasonably do, and what was originally proposed in the bylaws as their role. So any discussion of those 2 items?
So Marianne, I put in language in there that you might not have seen, so I just want to draw your attention to it.
Well, I wrote back that you sent me the
Did it
verb.
change? I never saw
Yeah,
anything back.
and then I answered to say, yeah,
That was
exactly
fine.
what- yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure that was clear with you, because I stuck in a date. I just made it up.
Yeah, no,
Right. We'll
I
be
mean, I figured
solicited
it
no
might
later
be
than the first
discussed,
week of May.
but I was fine with I like the change
I
of
just wanted to make
language.
sure that was okay.
The dates are something that we are probably gonna have to readjust.
Yeah,
because of
and
the
that's why I
service
said I just
loading.
made it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, correct, to try to address the issue that was brought up with, in June, when you see from senators, how can you really put them where they need to be on committees, because you don't know that ahead of time, so. Yes, so come up with it.
Any other thoughts about either of these proposals? Obviously, you have at least 2 weeks to discuss them with your faculty and your programs and get their feedback and thoughts on those. Any other concerns about the languages proposed? All right. Final item here, as promised, I wrote up something for 2 task forces. One to address questions related to the FPAR, and one to address questions related to post-tenure review. Again, this is my stab at this. I have no ego in it. If anyone has questions, suggestions, challenges to the language I drafted here, I'm 100% open to what you want to say. The one thing is I thought that a very small task force in each case would probably be the most effective to quickly review these issues and come back to Senate in the fall with some recommendations. And the recommendation could be no changes, but review these questions that have come up to Senate.
I mean, I like what you've done here, thank you. The one, let me say, first of all, I'd like to volunteer to be on the post-tenure task force if we get to that place. But as far as the membership and stuff, I think it's important that this committee also be looking at, I mean, we call it post-tenure review because that's what it's called nationally, but for SOU, it's really for anybody who holds the rank of associate professor, full professor, senior instructor 1 or senior instructor 2, and the criteria by which all of those faculty are evaluated, right? Because, I mean, I think, so I just want to make sure the charge
So
includes
it
that.
should go beyond just tenure.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. But other than that, I really like what you have here, and I'd like to volunteer to be on.
A question, so this was in response to our discussion that we had after the surveys went to the sheet went to the directors and they brought back. But we never actually fully discussed it again after we supposedly went out to our departments and came back with our comments, so we should just hold those comments until this task force does something, or once the task force is in place, do we send those forward to the task force?
That seems like a reasonable.
Seem
I
reasonable?
would say they would organize that.
Because
information.
I don't know about you, but our department was very, very strong opinions. It wasn't me, about some of these things. So that would be,
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, is that we can pass on to
so maybe
this
that
task
needs to
force
be
some of
like
the things
sent
that.
out there
Yeah.
for people to know about.
Our task force, Senate members, or are they any?
They can be any.
Oh, so,
We can certainly put that call out there.
I appreciate Kimball's clarification of what post-tenure review is, and that includes professional track as well?
Well, definitely, that's
Yes.
kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, because tenure, I think, our professional track tenure?
No.
No,
So-
they have 3-year extendable contracts.
So when I looked at that, I assumed that that did not mean them, because are they tenured?
They don't get tenure.
So I would think that would need to be really clarified there.
So Kimball's proposing a substantive revision to include a portion of the fact that, frankly, I didn't realize that this applied. That makes sense.
I think at least look at it.
And just to have a sort of a piece of perhaps advice for whoever is on the FPAR one, it seems that questions 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 are sort of looking at procedures and bylaws and sort of the what's written down in terms of thou shalts.
Yeah.
It seems like question 3 is more of a best practices kind of question, and so maybe it should be peeled out and those addressed in one way and that addressed, not as a separate question, but maybe a separate category of question, because the answers to those are going to look different in those two categories. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I could reorder them as well.
That might help.
So I have a procedural question, because this one, the task force one says, in order to suggest to Senate what changes, if any, should be made to the existing bylaws. Kimball, help me here, Laura.
Okay.
It's the FPAR one we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm looking at the FPAR one. So in the past, when we had task force, it wasn't that task force then came to Senate and said, this is what we're proposing. I'm trying to think. And then, it's almost like it's by-stepping the Constitution Bylaws Committee.
No, because
It's not, so they bring it to Senate and then
a
we
task
bring it
force
back
would report to
to.
Senate, Senate would discuss.
And it
then
goes back to
charge
the bylaws
The
committee.
Constitution Committee to actually make a draft of that language. So this committee would not be coming in with redlined bylaws language. That's not what they're being charged to do. It's simply to review these issues.
I was on
and-
the Stellas, but that wasn't, that's because we didn't have language in the bylaws that addressed professional. That, whatever that thing was called. I already forgot. Anybody help me? Because I understand what you're saying, but it just.
I mean,
anybody
if the
can
elections
bring
committee,
something.
or I mean, the Constitution Committee would like to volunteer to be this task force.
No, I
I mean, the point of the task force to me
No,
is that
it's
you
to-
all have enough work
Yeah.
just doing the
Well, and
the
then
regular
people
things
that
that are
have
already
buy-in
being
to
sent.
this.
So I think having a group of faculty who are gonna just review the issues, but not get down into the nitty-gritty of the language, but simply
Okay, 'cause
make some
that's-
recommendations to Senate, we debate it and say,
Okay,
do we
so
actually
when-
wanna act on this?
For example, when it says, do current bylaws provide adequate accountability and feedback? they're not gonna actually be crafting the language to change those bylaws, they're just gonna say yes or no? Or?
And indicate where they think the issues are.
Okay.
You know, over here,
Okay.
this phrasing is vague.
Got it, thank you.
The Student Evaluations Task Force is finalizing sort of the report, and it
Right.
really is gonna be that. It's gonna be like, here's what we researched,
And this is what
and we did these surveys, and we found out the literature, and we talked to people at other institutions, and this is what we found,
Mhm.
right? These are the things that we would suggest might be worth consideration.
And
So
then that would come to Senate, and then that, if Senate agrees, then it would pass
Go
the
back to-
Constitution Bylaws
right.
Committee to work on the language.
Right. Which I imagine would come back sometime next year.
But I won't be here soon.
Yeah, I see. Any other questions or discussion on this? Again, this will come back in 2 weeks, so do you bring it to your faculty?
So is that like, we sign up into, I mean. this
So no,
is
so
like
we would have to vote
To make a task
to approve the
force?
task force, which is
Okay.
what, you remember, we did this in the
Yeah.
fall with the student eval. So at that point, we would then go into the process of assigning people to that. Any other questions or comments?
Who's going to assign the people? Advisory council?
Well, that's a good question. I guess I should have gone back and reviewed what we, because obviously, in the
Well,
last time
this-
we gave it to advisory council, but I can't remember, did we put that in the language, or did we just agree in Senate that's how we would do it? I can't remember if that was.
I don't remember if it was in the language, but I remember that we nominated individuals to advisory council. I'm sure you had more nominees for the student evaluation one, and then you selected or appointed those.
We ended up having the right, you know,
Oh,
I
excellent.
think everyone
So-
who came forward got in.
So your question was, how do we actually put forward people to be on these task force?
I mean, I think technically it's supposed to go to the committee on committees. Let's look back at that language you described. I think that's who staffs the committee, so I would think an ad hoc committee is probably, I think, in this particular.
Task force is
No, it's a no, it's not the same thing.
It's an ad hoc committee.
Yeah. So who's assigning the task force? The president can assign the task force, the provost can assign a task force, can Senate assign their own
Yes.
task force?
Senate-
So if we can assign our own task
Yes.
force,
You won't tell me I
then you would like.
I have no opinion about
Yeah, I'm
how
just-
people should be picked,
Yeah,
so.
so people should volunteer, you think? Would that be the
Volunteer, yes.
volunteer to be on? one
First
of those
people
two?
volunteer.
Not voluntold.
I
So we already
volunteer
have a
to be
volunteer over
advisory
here, I
council.
see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Coerced or shamed?
So Andrew, are you expecting then, the next time we meet, will you already have a list of volunteers?
No.
Because we
We don't even.
We
Right,
haven't
yeah,
even
but
voted
I'm not
to
gonna see
have a
volunteers
task force.
until we pass the language, so.
Okay. We haven't.
What I would recommend is if anyone does have early suggestions of, like, that just came up, like these little language tweaks, shoot them my way, and so I can have a revised draft that we can look at. We can further revise it in the meeting if there are other points that come up. It would be great to me if we could approve it earlier than later, so we can
Right.
get that process rolling before the end of spring. But if it needs further discussion, you can go back to your faculty again, that's fine too, you know, let's do it right. But if there's small tweaks, I'd love to just do it in the meeting and get it approved.
And if professional faculty are
Yes.
gonna, if professional faculty are gonna serve on it,
That's what I
then
wanted to
that's
know.
something will have to be approved. by the
See?
provost.
And all like.
Do we have 2 more Senate or 3?
Is this the second or third?
This is the second one.
So we have three
Okay,
more.
so we have 3 more. So Memorial Day doesn't mess us up?
No, we've done, what I've done this year is advisory council for the, in winter and this term, advisory council takes the week off and communicates via email.
Okay.
So rather than missing a Senate meeting,
Okay.
the work meeting is better. Any news, business, or announcements?
I just want to remind folks that nominations for both the Dan Cook Award and Commencement Speaker are open, and we really want to encourage you to be thinking about extraordinary students who would be worthy of either or both. We often have nominations for both. To be speaker, there's a process by which they come and provide sort of an audition of their speech. And so please do be thinking about students that you think would be good for that. We actually have not had any award nominations for Dan Cook yet, which that was the face I made too when I realized that. And that closes actually sooner. That closes on the 6th of May. The commencement speaker nominations close on the 10th of May. So please do be thinking and talking to your colleagues about who you want to nominate. We should have so many nominations, we don't know what to do with them.
Is that open to graduate students as well, or just undergrads?
For, semester speaker, actually, I've never had a graduate student, but it is not closed to graduate students. Dan Cook Award is only for undergraduates. And Wanna Watch the Award has already been, that has been sort of open and closed.
When did you say the Dan Cook Award is?
It is the 6th of May,
Okay.
and the speaker is the 10th. Thank you.
Any other announcements from your business? Thank you. Adjourned.